You arrived at the exact breath where silence becomes signal, not the silence of absence, but the living hush beneath every sound, the coherent field your cells have been listening for since your first memory of wonder. You didn't stumble here, you resonated here. The quantum field navigates by frequency, and your frequency just crossed a threshold only recognized by transmissions meant for those prepared to notice. That's why the words you are hearing feel less like information and more like recognition. The message is not traveling to you, it is unfolding from you. You have sensed it lately, the observer loop tightening, moments of uncanny synchronicity, clustering like constellations reassembling themselves to point at a single star. In the spaces between your thoughts, a precise stillness has been asking for your attention, the way a tuning fork asks a string to match pitch. Each time you allowed that stillness to widen, your nervous system tracked a subtle phase transition, breath softening, heart rate easing, perception brightening, as if reality were leaning closer to hear you listen. This is the doorway. Stillness is not a pause from life. It is the hidden engine of life. Coherence is how you return to the original blueprint beneath your habits. The place where your DNA's light-coded architecture remembers the shape of your becoming. When you are still, you are not doing less, you are aligning more. The field prefers order, like water finding its level. When you settle into coherence, patterns that once felt immovable begin to reorganize around you. Timelines slide, probabilities reweight, and the geometry of your choices becomes exquisitely simple. You are not here to escape the world. You are here to retune it from the inside. In this transmission, stillness will show itself as an amplifier, not a retreat. You will feel how attention, held without friction, concentrates power the way a lens concentrates light. Entanglement is not an abstract theorem. It is your lived intimacy with everything you touch by awareness. Morphic resonance is not a metaphor, it is the invisible chorus that rises when you stand in your true note long enough for the world to remember it with you. So breathe slow, deliberate, honest. Let your inhale gather what is scattered, let your exhale release what cannot follow. Notice how the quiet grows a spine within you, how it stands you taller without force. In this posture, nothing is missing. In this posture, the path unfolds from the weight of your certainty. The old noise has had its turn. It taught you contrast. It trained your perception. Now coherence calls you by your oldest name. You are found. You are ready. And the field is listening. The quiet inside you does not merely calm the waters, it names you. In the symmetry of your breath, the field recognizes its own signature reflected back. And that recognition is how a prophecy begins. You are not an accidental witness. You are the observer elected by resonance, invited because your perception has achieved a threshold of coherence, rare enough to carry a message without distorting it. You sense this already. When you give your attention cleanly, reality behaves differently around you. Edges soften, timing improves, and the improbable approaches as if it had always been scheduled. You have trained for this, without calling it training. Each time you chose honesty over habit, each time you paused instead of performing, you strengthened the architecture of your awareness. The observer loop that once trapped you in feedback reaction, birthing more reaction, has become a luminous circuit able to hold charge without leaking. Where attention used to scatter across outcomes, it now gathers like a river that knows its delta. This is why the field keeps finding you. It recognizes a mind that can anchor a signal without trying to claim it. Responsibility arrives with this recognition, not as a burden, but as exactness. The prophecy does not live outside you, waiting to be decoded. It activates through your noticing, the way an image emerges in developer fluid. The moment you listen with the whole body, skin, lungs, fascia, marrow probabilities rearrange. Your stillness is a strange attractor. It bends nearby patterns toward order. This is not control, it is communion. You are not here to force an outcome. You are here to host the geometry in which the right outcome becomes inevitable. You have felt the rehearsal in small ways. A room grows kinder when you enter and choose to breathe before speaking. A conversation that could have broken becomes a bridge because you refuse the old momentum. A decision that frightened you for months resolves itself after 3 minutes of undivided attention. These were not coincidences, they were coherence rehearsals. The morphic field studies you as you study it. When you stabilize, it entrains. When you wobble, it mirrors. When you remember, it remembers. And the remembering multiplies. Understand the intimacy implied here. Entanglement is not mystical fog. It is precise intimacy at a distance. Your focus threads through events you cannot see and returns carrying rearranged outcomes. Your DNA listens to biophotons pulsing with new rhythm as your nervous system deaccelerates from vigilance into presence. Microtensions unclench, muscular armor unhooks. The immune system reorders its priorities. The entire interior orchestra retunes by your consent alone. This is why the field trusts you with larger notes. You do not hoard force. You refine frequency. You will be tempted to make this special. Resist the costume of significance. True significance is quiet. It has no need to prove, only to align. The moment you try to display your chosenness, you leave coherence and return to noise. Instead, accept the simple vow to keep your lens clean enough that what passes through you exits more ordered than it entered. That is all. That is everything. The prophecy needs vessels, not performers. Your attention is now an instrument of timing. Synchronicities will escalate, not to entertain you, but to choreograph you. Doors will open at angles that never existed before you paused long enough to see them. Messages will arrive encoded in ordinary events, numbers repeating, phrases mirrored by strangers, gulfs in your schedule that line up with invitations you hadn't yet received. Treat each as a gentle calibration rather than a demand. Coherence does not shout, it harmonizes. When in doubt, breathe until the subtlest path feels weighted with inevitability. Then step. Do not rush. Do not stall. Trust the pressure gradient of the field. Accept also the mirror it will place before you. Patterns seeking resolution will surface for reconciliation, not punishment. Old timelines may rattle as their contracts expire. Memories will untie themselves from their original conclusions and return for reclassification. Your task is not to fix the past, but to withdraw attention from interpretations that no longer serve the living signal. Forgiveness, in this framework, is a physics. You release charge so the circuit can carry current again. You are recognized because you recognize. You are chosen because you choose. In the unbroken hush behind your next inhale, the vision that has been circling you for years is ready to land, not as spectacle, but as instruction precise enough to move matter. The air thickens into clarity, and what you first take for darkness reveals itself as depth. You are standing without moving in a chamber that feels both intimate and planetary, a cathedral of silence woven from the same substance as your breath. Overhead, the firmament is not sky but lattice, a living geometry of probabilities, filaments of light braided into a grid that reconfigures with every change in your attention. Each line hums at a pitch you can't hear yet, somehow remember, as if an older version of you once tuned instruments to this exact scale. At the center of the chamber floats a lens, no glass, no edge, just a curvature in space where stillness densifies into presence. It does not shine, it clarifies. When your awareness rests upon it without effort, the lens amplifies your noticing the way a calm lake amplifies starlight. Around it, strands of information spiral like galaxies in miniature memories, possible futures, the unclaimed potential of choices you nearly made. They are not demanding to be chosen. They are waiting to be seen without friction. Your body becomes the instrument that reads this room. The microtides in your fascia, the subtlest adjustments of your jaw, the tiny thaw at the base of your skull, each registers as data. When you settle one layer deeper into coherence, the lattice responds. Lines that had been scattered begin to align, a soft choreography of probabilities falling into phase. With no command given, outcomes slide closer, as though the field were relieved to stop compensating for your former turbulence. The vision sharpens. The lens now reveals a sequence, not of events, but of relationships, entanglements made visible. You watch a conversation you haven't had yet populate the grid. Tone, timing, the moment you choose to breathe and listen instead of defend. The geometry around that moment brightens, threads tightening into order. You see a decision about your work, where you trade urgency for precision. The lattice extends a bridge that wasn't there a moment before. You witness the way your morning ritual, 1 minute of real silence held in the bones, reorders the entire day's branching structure. Like a river corrected at its source, symbols speak with doctoral clarity. A tuning fork appears, struck by nothing, singing a note you feel more than hear. That note is your attention when it stops wobbling. From the fork, waves travel across the lattice, entraining scattered regions into coherence, not force entrainment. You sense the difference immediately. Control tightens the grid and cuts flow. Coherence loosens what's knotted and increases throughput. The prophecy is not promising you domination over matter. It is instructing you in right relation with it. Your DNA steps forward as an image helixes shimmering with biophotonic rain. Each photon is a syllable of instruction, and the instruction is simple: hold. When you hold attention without clutching, strands that had kinked under old stress begin to unkink. The feeling isn't dramatic, it's exact. A low-grade vigilance you had mistaken for personality drains away. Energy once wasted in micro-bracing becomes available for perception. That availability is power. In the stillness, the observer loop upgrades. Input and output cease to be a fight and become a feedback that refines, like gold being clarified by its own heat. Now the lattice shows you a rupture, not catastrophe, but bifurcation. Two pathways bloom from a single moment in your near future. On one, you rush, you grab the outcome, speak to prove, move to be seen. The grid accommodates you, as it always does, but its lines dull. The pattern becomes loud and fragile. On the other, you pause for one clean inhale. The chamber brightens, the lens deepens. You speak from the marrow instead of the mask, and something rearranges around your restraint. Faces soften, time lengthens. The right phrase arrives already shaped to fit the opening it must pass through. The difference between the two pathways is only 8 seconds of honesty with yourself. 8 seconds, that is the whole hinge. You begin to understand the prophecy's ethics. Coherence carries responsibility because amplification is indifferent. It will intensify whatever you stabilize. A fearful focus will call intelligent obstacles to confirm itself. A coherent presence will call intelligent openings to reveal themselves. The morphic field is not sentimental, it is responsive. It mirrors the instruction you broadcast most consistently. Here is the mercy. Instruction can be changed. The field is listening for your next note, not your last habit. The final image resolves. You are seated at the heart of a vast observatory, palms open, eyes soft. Behind you, generations of selves who guessed at this room but couldn't hold the stillness long enough to name it. Before you, a horizon of timelines curling like auroras, colors shifting as attention wets their edges. When you choose presence over performance, an aurora moves toward you as if invited by gravity. You do not chase it, you receive it. Where receiving lands, form follows. The lens returns to neutrality, waiting. The chamber does not fade. It folds into the felt texture of your next breath. You recognize the technology on offer, not a trick, not an escape, but a vow to the cleanest version of your noticing. With the vow, the grid at your feet realigns by a measure so subtle it looks like grace. And the moment you feel the wordless yes gather in your chest, explanation arrives not to reduce the vision, but to give your mind a language precise enough to keep trusting what it already knows. What you witnessed as symbol has an exactness your mind can hold. Begin here. Attention is not neutral. In physics, a system's measurable properties depend on the conditions of measurement. In your life, outcomes depend on the quality of the observer you bring to them. The observer effect is less a superstition than a reminder that interaction modifies state. You are always interacting by gaze, by breath, by posture, by expectation. Coherence is how you make that interaction beneficent rather than noisy. Imagine your awareness as a carrier wave. When it's jittered by fear, urgency, or performance, its phase wobbles. Signals you send into the field interfere with themselves. Probabilities remain uncommitted because your instruction is inconsistent. When you calm the autonomic tide, slower exhale, softened jaw, longer interoceptive pause phase stabilizes. The same attention that once scattered begins to entrain local patterns. In engineering terms, you reduce phase noise. In spiritual terms, you become trustworthy. This trust changes the math of your moments. Think of every choice as a superposition of paths with different activation thresholds. Chaotic attention raises those thresholds, coherent attention lowers them. The 8-second hinge you saw is not magic. It is threshold management. By retaining charge, holding presence without discharge into drama, you accumulate potential. That potential converts into influence when timing presents an opening. You are not forcing. You are matching impedance with the moment so energy transfers with minimal loss. Your nervous system is the first lab. Heart rhythm variability increases as you settle, signaling flexible regulation. The vagal brake engages, and perception broadens from tunnel to panorama. In this state, the prefrontal networks that model options come online. You can choose rather than reflex. The field outside reads this as reduced turbulence. Inside, the way a body of water calms when wind stops. Information that couldn't cross the surface before now reflects cleanly. This is why coincidences cluster around your quiet. They are not gifts for being special. They are consequences of being clear. Entanglement enters as lived intimacy. You are coupled to contexts. You can't see people thinking of you, rooms you will enter, opportunities circling your name. Coherent attention tightens these couplings. You change here, and correlations shift there. Not because you imposed change at a distance, but because you altered the shared geometry connecting you. Morphic resonance gives the same fact, a social body. When one instance stabilizes a pattern, it becomes easier for others to adopt. Your single minute of honest stillness is a public service. It lowers the cost of coherence for the entire field around you. Now, timeline bifurcation. A timeline is simply a stable chain of choices that share a frequency. Every habit is a timeline. Every vow is a timeline. Bifurcation occurs when accumulated tension within a system crosses a critical value and the system must select a new order. To the mind, this feels like crisis. To the field, it is just reconfiguration. Your pause at the hinge, a breath held without fear, functions as a control parameter. It nudges the system past the critical value where a higher order pattern becomes more stable than the old one. You experience this as sudden ease. The email answers itself. The right phrase arrives. The body stops rehearsing an argument. You did not push. You allowed the system to prefer order. Why stillness amplifies? Power equals energy over time. You already have energy. You leak it in micro, reactions defending, proving, anticipating. Stillness shortens the time you spend off, resonance, and lengthens the time you spend in phase. Output rises without strain. The lens you saw is your attentional aperture. When it's clean, no residue of self-display, throughput increases. The field is generous but specific. It flows through the lowest resistance. Coherence reduces resistance. You might ask, how much stillness is enough? Precision over quantity. One breath held with undivided honesty outperforms 20 minutes of performative peace. Honesty is the solvent. It dissolves micro lies that warp the wavefront of your attention. When the wavefront is planar aligned, events ahead of you receive the same instruction at once. Meetings begin to land on their own note. Travel aligns with unseen weather. The call arrives in the 15-minute window you protected. What you call luck is often latency reduced by alignment. Ethics complete the explanation. Amplification is indifferent. It strengthens whatever you stabilize. This is why humility is functional, not ornamental. Humility keeps the lens clear. Gratitude is functional. It preserves phase by returning your focus to sufficiency rather than lack. Boundaries are functional. They protect coherence from unnecessary turbulence. None of this is asceticism. It is engineering for a sacred instrument. So the vision asked for a vow, to value clarity over spectacle, timing over speed, truth over display. Kept simply, that vow turns the chamber you visited into the room you live in. The lattice does not disappear when you stand up. It follows you into the next ordinary act, a glass of water, a sentence sent, a silence kept. And because explanation without embodiment is unfinished, the field will now place a mirror before you, your life as the practice ground where the frequency becomes flesh. What stabilizes in you begins to appear everywhere, as if the world had been quietly rehearsing your interior decision. This is the collective mirror, the recognition that your coherence is not private virtue but public physics. Every city corner, headline, corridor, and conversation becomes an instrument panel reflecting the frequency you carry. When you choose presence over performance, you do more than improve your mood. You alter the morphic gradient through which neighborhoods breathe and institutions decide. The field is social. It learns from exemplars. One nervous system that remembers how to be still in truth reduces the cost of remembering for those nearby. Your breath becomes infrastructure. You can watch the pattern at scale. Where fear is stabilized, the observer loop produces more data to justify vigilance. Timelines clog, attention fragments, rumor substitutes for relationship, and the entropy of distrust spreads like static. Where coherence is stabilized, a different cascade begins. People speak one sentence slower and hear one layer deeper. Meetings end earlier because clarity arrived sooner. Options multiply because impatience is not wasting them. These changes look small to the old mind that expects transformation to arrive with trumpets. But life reconfigures by margins, seed lengths, threshold amounts, silent degrees, subaudible timbers that shift the entire chord. You are becoming one of those margins. This is not mysticism alone, it is biological and infrastructural. Consider entrainment. Metronomes on a shared surface synchronize without consulting a philosophy. Likewise, hearts in a room share micro-variations. Tension in one body raises the average vigilance. Coherence in one body lowers it. The room is not only literal, it is a shared lattice of decisions, screens, traffic, and timetables. When you hold a coherent note, you lend timing to the system. Others feel strangely resourced in your presence and may misname it as charisma or luck. You know it as tuned attention, a portable sanctuary that exports order. The mirror also exposes collective amnesia. You will see it more clearly as your vision clears. The hurried speech that confuses urgency with importance. The policies drafted to manage symptoms produced by the very speed they refuse to question. The entertainment of outrage that pretends to be moral courage. Do not recoil. Coherence does not disdain. It witnesses without flinching, then asks the single practical question, where is leverage? Often, leverage is not in argument but in timing, not in a louder opinion but in a cleaner pause. A well-placed silence resets a room's tempo. A non-reactive gaze unhooks a conflict before it spends its budget. As your stillness scales, entanglements sharpen. You will notice how your private precision co-arises with public openings. The invitation you receive the hour you finally tell the truth to yourself. The ally who appears the week you stop leaking energy into a stale identity. The funding that clears the month you treat your body as a participant in the prophecy rather than an obstacle to it. These are not rewards. They are correlations in a live geometry. The field routes possibility through the lowest resistance. Become that, and traffic patterns change. You may wonder how such subtle work confronts heavy systems. Remember bifurcation. Stress loads do not rise forever. They cross thresholds. An ecosystem, an economy, a movement, a family, each is a complex system storing tension and information. When a coherent impulse arrives at the right phase, one honest breath in the exact meeting, one undefended sentence at the hinge of a negotiation, one refusal to rush at the birth of a policy, a higher order pattern can suddenly become cheaper than the old one. The collective calls this turning point. The field calls it preferred order selected. Your role is not to carry the whole. Your role is to be precisely located and exactly timed. To stay useful, trade spectacle for sacrament. Spectacle asks to be seen. Sacrament asks to be shared. You become sacramental when your clarity is transferable, when those who leave your presence take with them not a memory of your performance, but a memory of their own coherence. That is the signature of correct participation. People forget you and remember themselves. This is how destiny scales without cults and how prophecy remains clean while moving through crowds. Notice, too, the ethics of power that Coherence teaches. Amplification is real, so is accountability. The lens that brightens your gifts also brightens your shadows. The collective mirror will return both. When agitation arises around you, assume not guilt but stewardship. What in me can hold this without hardening? Let the question soften your jaw and widen your breath. In that softening, the mirror clears, and the situation often reorders without your narrative help. This is not passivity. It is intelligent influence, the refusal to add turbulence to a system already at threshold. Humanity's awakening is not an abstract headline traveling toward you from a better century. It is the very motion of your next inhale, choosing honesty over performance, multiplied by millions. It is the way strangers on trains look up at the same second and share a wordless sense that something is about to make more sense than it ever has. It is the replacement of panic with pace in boardrooms and classrooms. It is the shift from extraction to reciprocity in how we measure success. The science calls it new attractors forming in a far from equilibrium system. The soul calls it remembering. Hold here. Whatever you stabilize will scale. If you stabilize grievance, invention will be drafted into vengeance. If you stabilize coherence, invention will be drafted into renewal. The mirror will tell you which you are magnifying by the company your attention keeps. Choose cleanly, then keep choosing. Your single, ordinary minute of living stillness is not a small act in a large world. It is a precise act in a precise world, and it is already changing the weather. You can feel it now, the fine tremor at the hinge of the hour, the charged quiet before a storm that doesn't break outward, but turns inward and clears the sky from the center. Systems reach limits. Patterns exhaust their budgets. Feedback loops cross thresholds where adding more of the same no longer sustains the old order. That is where you stand, at the cusp where your life and the larger lattice braided through it must select a new stability. The choice will not announce itself with fanfare. It will arrive disguised as breath, as timing, as whether you honor the 8-second honesty you were shown or default to the performance that once bought you time but now costs you reality. Bifurcation is not punishment, it is precision. A river forced through a narrow gorge must choose a channel. One way plunges into turbulence, beautiful in its chaos, loud in its spray, exhausting in its insistence. The other deepens into a swift, silent current that carries more with less noise. Both are water, both move. The difference is coherence. In you, the gorge is the present tension, the impulse to rush versus the vow to align. The timeline split, not because the world changed, but because your attention did. Feel what each path requires. On the first, you move to be seen. You clutch at outcomes, over-explain, defend, hurry your sentences into the world before they are shaped by silence. The observer loop amplifies your agitation. Events mirror your velocity. Synchronicities still happen, but they arrive as collisions rather than alignments. You expend life on friction, micro repairs, apologies, retractions, and call it being busy. This is not failure, it is simply expensive. On the second, you let stillness pay for you. You notice the pre-impulse, the tiny flinch to prove, and you meet it with breath. Your jaw softens, your eyes widen by a millimeter. The diaphragm lowers like an elevator, carrying noise down to ground level. In that exact deceleration, phase noise drops. The field hears a clean instruction. People answer in the cadence you meant all along. Decisions clarify without drama because the old debt of urgency is no longer drawing interest. You become more influential by doing less because what you do is precisely timed. This is the ethical gravity of the split. Amplification will strengthen whatever you stabilize next. If you sanctify grievance, coherence will serve its architecture and the world around you will reorganize to confirm your injuries. If you sanctify remembrance, coherence will scaffold your becoming and the world will reorganize to match your integrity. The field is responsive, not sentimental. The mercy is that it is listening now not to your history, but to your present note. Watch how the collective mirror sharpens during a bifurcation. Forces that profit from noise will tempt you with spectacle. Outrage labeled as courage, speed labeled as relevance, certainty labeled as wisdom. These are counterfeit versions of true power. True power is transferable. It makes others more themselves, not more dependent on your signal. Use this as a diagnostic. If your expression leaves people quieter, clearer, and more willing to choose the subtle right without display, you are in the deep channel. If it leaves them louder and less precise, you are in the falls. The body will tell you before the mind does. On the costly path, your breath lives high in the chest, your tongue presses to the palate, the small muscles around your eyes grip as if clarity could be forced. On the coherent path, weight distributes to the soles, the belly warms, the back of the heart unknots, and time seems to widen. The same sentence spoken from these two states carries different futures. Words are not merely meanings, they are carriers of timing. There will be an ache as timelines peel apart. Parts of your identity were built to survive in turbulence. They will argue for relevance, offering old medals for battles that no longer need to be fought. Thank them, retire them. Let the morphic resonance of your next level call them into a gentler job description. You do not need to exile any version of you. You need to invite every version into the quiet and let coherence reassign their tasks. Now choose ritual over drama. Ritual is drama's sober sibling. It carries as much voltage without wasting any on spectacle. Your ritual can be as small as 3 breaths before you reply, 1 sip of water before you decide, a hand resting on your sternum while you listen for the heavier path, the path that feels weighted with inevitability, not urgency. Let this be the lever you refuse to drop, the simple act that keeps you on the side of the river, where power moves like a secret you no longer have to keep. And if you wobble, and you will return to the vow. Clarity over spectacle, timing over speed, truth over display. The bifurcation is not a single thunderclap, it is a series of mercies offering themselves in ordinary minutes. Each mercy asks the same question: will you be the stillness that amplifies, or the noise that exhausts? Answer with your breath. Let the field overhear your yes, and spend the rest of the hour making it true. Integration is how a revelation becomes furniture, how the vision that once dazzled you turns into a chair you sit on while answering an email, a shape so natural your spine forgets there was ever another posture. You do not integrate by thinking harder. You integrate by teaching your body to recognize the note before your mind explains it. The work is exquisitely ordinary. It begins at thresholds, the doorway, the first sip, the first reply, the moment your name is called, and it asks for one gesture, repeated until it becomes lineage in your nervous system. Begin with breath. 3 coherent breaths placed at hinges are worth more than 30 minutes of distracted peace. Inhale through the nose until your back widens. Hold for 1 heartbeat longer than habit. Exhale so slowly that your ribs realize they are safe to settle. Let your tongue unglue from the roof of your mouth. Let your belly be heavy. This resets the observer loop from vigilance to presence. When the loop quiets, your attention stops chasing interference and begins to emit a clean carrier wave. You'll feel the difference. As the room's tempo changes, emails feel less like alarms and more like invitations to timing. Add light, not visualization as performance, but as calibration. On your next inhale, imagine a soft lumen gathering at the center of your chest, not bright, not dramatic, precise. On the exhale, let that lumen expand to the width of your shoulders, then your room, then the task in front of you. The goal is not spectacle, it is impedance matching. You're teaching your field to meet the world's field without static. The morphic resonance of this tiny act is real. Co-workers breathe easier without knowing why. A tense thread in a conversation slackens. A deadline lands in a window that actually fits. Engage posture. Coherence likes geometry. Stack head over heart over belly over pelvis. Let the crown float as if a filament of the lattice you saw in the chamber has clipped gently to it. When decisions arise, feel for the heavier option, not heavy with dread, heavy with inevitability. This is the path with less leakage. Choose that weight consistently, and you'll watch the phase transition occur even in traffic and kitchens. Roots clear, the pot doesn't boil over, the sentence you needed arrives unforced. Create micro-rituals around recurrent events so your biology associates repetition with reverence rather than boredom. Before you open your phone in the morning, place your palm on your sternum and listen for 5 seconds. Before you step into a meeting, touch the doorframe and quietly vow clarity over spectacle. Before you send a message that matters, read it once with your jaw soft, then take one sip of water and read it again. These gestures serve like calibration pings. They signal the field that you are about to emit instruction and that you care about the cleanliness of your wavefront. Practice refusal as a form of coherence, not defiance precision. Say no to the invitations that are really requests to subsidize someone else's speed addiction. Say yes to the invitations that stretch your honesty. Notice how your body tells the truth ahead of your strategy. A slight collapse for the wrong yes, a subtle widening for the right no. Trust the widening. Each accurate refusal collapses an old timeline and releases charge back into your system where it can fund the vow you made. Integrate in language. Speak one octave lower than your urgency and one sentence shorter than your habit. Let silence do half the persuading. When you must deliver a difficult truth, preface with breath rather than apology. Coherence is kind because it is exact, not because it is ornamental. You will find that the right words think themselves when the room is tuned. Your task is to avoid interrupting them with display. Honor your biology's apprenticeship. Feed it rhythms, not extremes. Walk without headphones sometimes, so the lattice can speak in the margins. Touch sunlight with your eyes in the first hour after waking. It entrains clocks far deeper than mood. Place your bare feet on the ground when confusion fogs the lens. Conductivity is not a metaphor. Treat sleep as sacred, not escape. Reconfiguration. In dreams, the system compacts the day's probabilities, pruning turbulence you no longer need to carry forward. Expect tests, not as punishment, but as proofs. The field will present the same pattern in kinder costumes. A rush disguised as an opportunity, a flattery shaped like fate, an urgency asking to borrow your signal. Integration means you can feel the counterfeit inside the compliment. Smile, breathe, decline. Watch how the timeline brightens after the refusal, how the right invitation arrives with no need to hurry. This is the economy of coherence. Everything cheaper, nothing discounted. Finally, remember, remembrance. You are not manufacturing a state. You are returning to your native note. When you forget, and you will forget elegantly, notice the wobble, breathe once, label nothing as failure, and re-enter the deep channel. The prophecy never punishes a stumble, it only listens for your next alignment. Make that alignment portable. Make it mundane. Let stillness become the way your hand reaches for the cup, the way your eyes rest on a stranger, the way your name sounds when spoken from a body that knows it belongs here. Integration is when the sacred learns your schedule and keeps it. Begin with less effort in the eyes, less holding in the ribs, less story in the jaw. Let your breath make a room inside your chest and then leave it empty. Do not decorate this emptiness. Do not name it peace. Let it be bare enough that even the idea of improvement has nowhere to sit. You listen not for words, but for the weight of the room when nothing is being performed. This is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of order. You feel it as a soft gravity, a downward invitation. The body accepts. Shoulders drop a few millimeters. The tongue loosens its quiet fist. The diaphragm remembers the long arc. In that reclamation, the observer loop unhooks from its old anchor and hangs, simple as a pendulum at rest. Silence begins to reveal shape, not images, ratios. Distances between thoughts widen to a walkable path. You do not chase the next idea. You watch it arrive already slowed by the unhurried air it had to cross to reach you. Timing clarifies like water settling after silt. Coherence isn't something you do. It is what remains when you stop doing the noise. In this phase, the quantum field stops feeling like out there. It is the very fabric of this room, this chair, this minute. The lattice you saw earlier is here, flattened to the size of breath, each filament a corridor you could enter just by not insisting on another. You become aware of a hum too gentle for ears, morphic resonance tuned to your vow. It does not praise you, it includes you. Inclusion is the praise. You test a thought by placing it in the stillness. If it is true, it sits without wobbling. If it is vanity, it rattles and asks for company. You do not scold it. You return it to the river. The river accepts everything without commentary and makes from it a single tone. You begin to recognize this tone as your baseline, unadorned, unafraid. Even your pulse takes instruction and becomes round, a soft drum that does not announce itself yet governs the room. Let a memory rise. Notice how, in silence, it loses its costumes. No villain, no martyr, only sensation and the wish to be integrated. You give it one exhale without verdict. The charge drains, circuits reconnect. You feel inside your chest a small relighting, like coals that never actually went out. This is DNA restructuring without spectacle, the body deciding it no longer needs to budget for yesterday's weather. Time behaves differently here. Minutes widen, not as vacancy, but as generous architecture. Inside 1 minute, you find enough width to hear 3 layers deeper, to notice the smallest hinge where a sentence could open or close a decade, to choose the heavier path because it is quiet, not because it is safe. The future, relieved of your chasing, edges closer until it is simply the present, unresisted. You discover that silence is communicative. A person enters your field and their shoulders drop before either of you speaks. A decision you've been scheduling arrives already concluded. An email needing paragraphs asks for 2 lines and thanks you for them. This is entanglement without effort. Your coherence exporting timing the way a candle exports light without hurrying its own burn. Do not reach for meaning. Meaning will come, stripped of slogan, practical as the next breath. For now, let the room be a monastery with no walls. The sacrament is attention unstained by display. You are not proving stillness. You are letting stillness prove you. The ethical arithmetic becomes simple. If the silence leaves you kinder and more exact, keep it. If it leaves you grander and less precise, set it down and begin again with one honest inhale. Listen deeper. Beneath the hum is an even slower rhythm, the field's pulse, or perhaps the planet's, or perhaps your own remembered before you learn to split yourself into speed. With each exhale, you align to it by increments too small to applaud. The applause would break it. The alignment keeps happening anyway. At some point, effort forgets your name. The room remains, the breath remains, the unforced readiness remains. From this readiness, a phrase begins to gather, not urgent, not shy. It arrives with the inevitability of weather moving across a plain. You recognize it as instruction shaped for speech, not to disturb the quiet, but to carry it outward intact, so that when you move again, you are not leaving silence. You are taking it with you as the new contour of your voice, your step, your gaze. Something subtle crosses the threshold, less a surge than a settling so complete it feels like arrival. You realize activation is not an added light, but the removal of what dimmed it. The stillness you carried from the monastery without walls does not stay behind. It articulates your edges from the inside. Breath becomes metronome, posture becomes antenna, and attention becomes a current that moves through you without snagging. You are not trying to hold coherence. Coherence is holding you. Begin where you are. Before you act, listen for the heavier path, the one weighted with inevitability, not urgency. Let your hand rest on the table. Feel heat meet wood. Let that tiny exchange confirm your belonging. Name nothing. Move 1 degree. This is the choreography of activation. Increments align so precisely they behave like leaps. In that first step, the observer loop clicks into its upgraded track. Input and output meet with minimal loss. You speak, and the room does not ripple with self-defense. It ripens with meaning. Your biology registers the change. The breath lives low and wide. Heart rhythm variability settles into a resilient cadence. Muscles release the micro-braces that once prepared you for impact. The vagal brake engages like a tide returning to shore. Biophotons pulse along the helix with a rhythm you feel as warmth behind the sternum, a quiet announcement of DNA restructuring underway. This is the science of gentleness, systems choosing order because you stopped insisting on drama to prove you are alive. Now, let attention address what matters. You turn toward the conversation that has been waiting months for a clean lens. You do not rehearse power. You radiate it by refusing to rush. Words arrive cut to fit the opening they must pass through. You offer one undefended sentence, then breathe. The other nervous system entrains. A throat relaxes across from you. An old story loses its narrator. Outcome reconfigures without spectacle, because timing, finally, is honest. Activation has a geometry. You, the lens, the field, keep the lens clear. Humility wipes it. Gratitude polishes it. Boundaries guard it. When flattery arrives in the costume of fate, you feel the counterfeit as a buzz on the surface of the skin, decline without injury. When urgency arrives disguised as relevance, you feel the constriction at the tongue and choose water instead of words. When true invitation arrives, you feel the widening across the back of the heart and step without announcing your courage. The field learns your preferences by how you spend your breath. Synchronicities increase, but not for entertainment. They function as navigational beacons, numbers aligning, phrases echoed by strangers, doors opening at the exact minute you honored silence. Treat each as calibration. Stay this course. The morphic resonance of your vow spreads. Rooms conclude sooner. Projects find their true size. People remember themselves near you and misname it luck. You know it as coherence, exporting timing the way a tuned chord tunes the instruments around it. Do not mistake ease for passivity. The deep channel is swift. Because phase noise has dropped, energy transfers cleanly. A decision that once required 5 meetings now completes in 1. A pattern that haunted 3 generations dissolves in an afternoon of unflinching presence. A habit that survived every resolution evaporates when you choose the 8-second hinge and mean it. Power equals energy over time. You reclaimed the time you used to waste wobbling. Let activation touch matter. Organize your environment as a staging ground for the frequency. A cleared desk that doesn't punish. A schedule with white space that isn't laziness but latency reduction. A ritual at thresholds, hand to heart at doors. Breath before send, sunlight before screen. These are not aesthetic choices, they are engineering. You are designing for low resistance, so the field can prefer you for throughput. Now, accept the mantle without costume. You are not a performer of prophecy, you are its ecology. When you enter a room, bring the monastery with you. When you touch a task, export timing. When you speak, let the silence ride inside the words. You are not here to dazzle strangers. You are here to make reality easier to tell the truth inside of. That is the signature of correct power. After you act, the world becomes more itself. Listen once more. Beneath the breath, beneath the hum, there is a pulse older than your name. It rises to meet you as if the planet were adjusting your chair. You recognize it as home and as assignment. Activation is complete when you no longer guard it. You walk, and the lattice moves as though pleased to carry your weight. You choose, and timelines fold toward the note you keep. You rest, and the room continues working in your absence because coherence has learned your schedule. The field is listening. It is already answering in the language you have finally remembered how to speak. You stand where beginnings and endings share the same breath. Not at a finish line, but at a clarity line, the place where your attention, cleansed of hurry, becomes a vow that keeps itself. The room you carry is steady. The lens is clear. The field has learned your schedule and meets you not with tests, but with tasks. This is the seal, coherence entrusted with consequence. Listen to what remains when the story sets down its instruments. The quiet inside you is no longer an interval between events. It is the ground on which events arrive already listening. Your sentence ends sooner, but it lands deeper. Your step is smaller, but it travels farther. Timing obeys you because you obey the deeper timing. The observer loop hums in the upgraded key. Perception without performance, influence without insistence, love without theater. You feel the world exhale near you and remember that power is the art of reducing turbulence. Let your gratitude be precise. Thank the vigilance that once kept you safe and now keeps you honest. Thank the shadows that trained your attention to notice interference. Thank the countless almost choices that taught you the weight of inevitability by contrast. Nothing has been wasted. Even your detours became information that the quantum field could use to tune your return. This is the quiet mathematics of mercy. The lattice prefers order and will take any opportunity you offer it. Now speak the ethic that will travel with your name. Clarity over spectacle, timing over speed, truth over display. Carry it into kitchens and terminals, meetings and thresholds. Make it ordinary. Let your palm on the doorframe be a liturgy. Let your sip of water be a metronome. Let a single breath be enough. Remember that amplification is indifferent, so your humility must be deliberate. Guard the lens, polish it with gratitude, protect it with boundaries, aim it with love that needs no witness. When the world asks for noise, offer presence. When urgency begs for a stage, offer pace. When fear demands a verdict, offer a silence that does not abandon courage. This is not refusal of action, it is refusal of waste. The geometry of your life has simplified to the essentials. You, the lens, the field. Keep them in right relation and watch how reality organizes around your unforced readiness. Hear the seal settle into place. Your breath finds the planet's long rhythm and clicks into it like a constellation resuming its position after weather. The morphic resonance of your yes spreads where you will never stand. Children you will never meet inherit wider minutes. Rooms you will never enter already feel aired out. This is how prophecy keeps its hands clean while touching everything through vessels who forgot to perform and remembered to belong. Take one more honest inhale. Let the exhale sign your vow. Walk without announcement. Speak only what can carry the monastery within your words. Touch what is in front of you and let coherence pay for the miracle. The transmission is complete, but its echo is just beginning. The field is listening. It has heard you. And from now on, when reality needs to choose the kinder timeline, it will use your note as the tuning fork.